Hello, welcome to another video. Right, disclaimer, this video is not an action-packed big adventure video. It's autobiographical, it's a talking head video. It's me sort of talking about when I was a little tiny kid and a baby and showing where I was from. So if you're slightly interested and you grew up on a terraced street in the north of England, or you want to see what that was like, then watch on. But I just feel the need to sort of say this isn't a great big action-packed video. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Hello, welcome to the new video. Somebody said to me the other day after the Saddleworth Moor video, so when's your next big adventure then? When's your next big adventure video? And I thought, I work full time, I can't do adventure videos all the time. But YouTube is a strange thing because it's like one of those sperm whales. It just opens its gob and just consumes massive amounts of plankton in one go. Plankton being videos, in that you upload a video and you're like, great, I've uploaded a video, and YouTube goes, great, we've got your video, thanks a lot, when's your next one? Tomorrow? No, day after? In a week? And sort of like before you know it, a week's passed and you need to upload another video, because I'd like to grow the channel, I'd like to get views on the videos. No big ideas about being famous, but I'd like to get a few views and stuff, and it's nice to get the feedback and everything, and it's nice making videos, I just enjoy it. Anyway, I've made enough videos that have just gone out into the ether and nobody's watched. I know what that's like. So forgive me for today, I'm going to get a little bit autobiographical. I'm going to show you where the first house where I lived, and yeah, roll the bleeding tape. Okay, so this is where the story starts. This is the dawn of time for Martin 0401. You'll see there a disused railway and a footbridge, all in black and white. Really lucky that I found this photograph, really rare. You'll see there also in the background a row of terraced houses. Probably when this photo was took, I was a baby in those terrace houses, having me nappy changed. This area was called the Bankings, and we used to play on this area, and I never knew why it was called the Bankings. Obviously, duh, it was because it was the railway Bankings. But yeah, quite a find this. So I'll show you how it is now. So this is how it looks now. It's all been landscaped, and that's where the railway used to run down there. And see those trees there? I'm probably older than those trees. Well, in fact, I am older than those trees, which is quite scary. And when they landscaped this area, the big diggers and the bulldozers that came in, I used to talk to the drivers. I was fascinated with the diggers and the bulldozers. Really took my imagination. But I was a bit of a strange child, a bit of a loner, and I took great pleasure in watching this whole area be landscaped. Okay, so we're heading up now to Lancaster Avenue, as it's called. Okay, so typical terrace street. These houses were built without bathrooms in them. They were actually built as 3-bedroomed houses, later to be modernised and bathrooms put in and made into 2-bedroomed houses. But looking at it now, honestly, totally miserable in it. I can't put it in any other way really. And this is number 3 where we live there, that second house on the left. And that yard, there's pictures of me in that yard dressed as a little cowboy. I'll put the picture in here now for you. And tin bath, we had a tin bath because it was a 3-bedroomed house. We didn't have a bathroom, and there's memories of a tin bath leaning up against that wall there, and my mum and dad used to bring it into the kitchen, fill it with hot water and have a bath in the kitchen. Can you believe? I bet things haven't changed on that street since probably wartime, like 1940s, 1950s. Nothing had changed. The same people that had lived there in the war. My grandma still lived there. You know, culture on that little subculture on that street hadn't really changed. So there's the house, the front of it. Second one on the right there with a white front door. We had a red front door at the time. Lots of memories of being a very, very young child in that house. I don't know whether they were good memories or bad memories. Let me explain. So at the time, in the late 60s, early 70s, my dad was a singer in the clubs. He was a club singer. And he got a bit of a following and stuff. And he weren't a bad looking guy and he could sing. But he was also a bit of a philanderer with the women. He liked the women and they liked him. But he had a family at home, a young family. He had my mum and 3 children by then. And his philandering ways sort of drove my mum to despair, and she was in love with him, and she became very, very jealous of what he was getting up to in the clubs and stuff. And I think it sent her under. She had a kind of a mental breakdown, really, and she suffered for years and years and years. And this was in the days before antidepressants. They just used to give you tranquilizers, basically. So I was born into this environment of my mum going through a breakdown, my dad with his philandering ways, leaving us for women and the odd, whatever affair had come up, and a lot of trauma and a lot of arguments. Now, I'm not saying I was abused, I'm not saying I had a bad childhood, because later on things were great, but I was born into that environment of a young woman coping with a husband that was a philanderer, and she was going through this hell of a time, and he was off enjoying the life in the clubs, and he should have been a single man, really, and he wasn't. And it just created a lot of tension, a lot of arguments, and as a very, very young child, I absorbed all this, and it made me very unconfident, quite traumatised myself, and very scared. And in that house, the only memories I've got are of being quite a scared child. And couple that with the fact that my dad never really bonded with me, never really showed me much love. I never really, it was my mum I clung to her desperately. So very, very early on, a lot of insecurity, and that paves the way for the rest of your life. That, of course, absolutely fine now, you get over it, and I'm not trying to make it into a sob story, because it's not, but that's what, like I say, that's what I was born into, and it was it made me a very unconfident child. Memories of this little gap in the houses here. You got an echo, and when women walked down this gap, the heels would clip, 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 would really, really echo. And I always used to listen and think, when I was a kid, is it my grandma, is it my mum walking through the gap, thinking they were coming home? And there's Grandma and Grandad's house, that house there with the brown front door. Many, many happy times in that house. Grandma making tater hash, which was the local stew that you used to make. Tater hash, and I go up there on a Tuesday and a Wednesday evening and have many, many plates of tater hash that she'd warm up. She'd make it on like a Tuesday and continue to warm it up Wednesday, Thursday, and put it with a pie from the chippy on a Friday. But yeah, good memories in that house. That was Grandma's house. So without word of a lie, this is probably the first place I ventured away from home on my own when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and I had my first experience of horror. You see that building there? Well, that used to be a club, a conservative club or something. It was all derelict when I was a child, and some big kid, I bet it was only about 11 years old, came along and said, there's a dead body in there, and it's all ripped apart and there's blood everywhere. And we stood on those steps horrified, and I bet this kid was only about 11 and we were about 3 or 4 years old, and the horror just does you good, doesn't it? So my other experience of horror as a child was, see those houses there, they abruptly stop. Well, the row of houses carried on down there where I'm showing you, and for a while, for a long time, they were just stood empty and derelict, and the windows were smashed and the curtains were still hanging at the windows, and the curtains were sort of blowing out of the house and blowing in and out, and it, as a kid, with a vivid imagination, it was horrifying. And you stood across the road and looked across at the houses and you could still see furniture in, and I thought there were people in the house that still lived there. And couple that with the fact that this girl said to us one day, see them houses there, there's a bad man that lives in there with a knife. Well, that was it. Horror time, wasn't it? Forget all the Hollywood horrors. That set me up for life. So couple that story with the fact that on that street there used to be a young girl that lived there, and she was disabled. In fact, probably nowadays we'd call it cerebral palsy. But when I was, like I say, I was a tiny child, my mum used to go and visit the house, and this girl had been in a wheelchair, and she was very deformed. I mean, I don't mean to be horrible, but she was very deformed, and I'd never seen that as a kid, a young toddler. And I remember, I think I just used to sit and stare at her, and she traumatized me. And bless her, the girl used to talk to me. She was called Irene, probably long since dead, but she used to talk to me and be nice to me. She was about 12 or 13, and I just used to stare. And I used to go home and I used to have dreams about her. I used to dream that she was chasing me. Just things like that as a kid really affect you. There was cotton mills everywhere as well. Obviously they weren't still making cotton at the time, but these big, vast, dark, satanic mills were everywhere, all over the place. And they fascinated me as well, and the names of them fascinated me. Particularly when they were being pulled down. I took great delight as a kid in watching the demolition of these vast, big, massive, monolithic mills. I can't get any more poetic than that, but yeah, that was fascinating as a child as well. So that whole area that I was showing you then actually got bombed during the war and suffered some hits from bombs from the Germans. And yet none of the bombs went off. They dropped and probably caused damage just by physically dropping, but none of them exploded. And the reason why they didn't explode was because they'd been sabotaged by apparently Czechoslovakian workers in German factories that knew they were working for the war effort and somehow managed to sabotage the bomb so they didn't explode, basically. And if you think about the amount of lives that they saved through doing that, you know, because the Germans unwittingly took these bombs, went on bombing raids, dropped them on the north of England, which is obviously where I was from and where my family were from, and they never exploded for that very reason. And you know, it's really quite touching, really, that they did that, and they risked their own sort of life and limb to sabotage the German war effort. Really interesting story that my mum and my grandma told me. That's it, that's another video. Thanks for watching. If you got this far, thank you very much for getting this far and for being interested. I hope I didn't bore you too much. My name's been Martin, and I shall see you in the next video. Take care.